Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The ongoing violence has claimed more lives in Iraq, including 2 police officers and 16 people killed execution style. Gunmen shot dead the 2 senior policemen in the northern Iraqi city of Kirkuk. Colonel Graham Othman, the head of the Ministry of Interior Department set up to combat terror, was killed along with Major Ghanem Jihad while they were traveling to Baghdad. In western Iraq, the bodies of 16 people who were killed execution style have been discovered. Police said 22 Iraqi soldiers were kidnapped after leaving their base in the town of Qa'im near the Syrian border. It was not immediately clear if the victims, who were in civilian clothes, were soldiers from the kidnapped group. Many were blindfolded with their hands tied behind their backs. Al-Qaeda's group in Iraq said yesterday it was holding 36 Iraqi soldiers hostage and demanded the government free all women prisoners within 24 hours. In Beiji, north of Baghdad, a car bomb blew up next to a U.S. convoy, wounding 5 U.S. soldiers. U.S. forces cordoned off the road immediately after the attack. In a separate attack, 3 people were wounded in southern Baghdad when gunmen entered a Shiite mosque in the Dura district of the city. Witnesses said the gunmen shot their way in during Friday prayers, but police officers said the service had finished when the attack happened. Israeli soldiers have shot tear gas on Palestinians' demonstrations against the West Bank wall, while in Arab East Jerusalem, Israeli forces imposed strict security. 15 Palestinians were reported injured following stone-throwing clashes with troops over the construction of the wall, which cuts through Palestinian land. Residents of the village of Marda rallied against the barrier wall, which resulted in the uprooting of hundreds of olive trees, a source of livelihood for the Palestinian residents. When the procession approached Israeli soldiers, violence erupted as Israeli forces shot tear gas at the demonstrators, who responded with stones and rocks. The demonstrations against the barrier have become a tradition as its building advances swiftly in parts onto private Palestinian land. Meanwhile, hundreds of Palestinian worshippers were prohibited from praying at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem Old City. The worshippers were forced to pray outside the Old City gates as Israeli police refused to allow Muslims under the age of 40 to enter Islam's third holiest site. Israeli police routinely enforce strict measurement at the Old City on Friday, the day of prayers for Muslims. Italian hostage Clementina Cantoni has returned home after she was released from captivity in Afghanistan. Cantoni, an aid worker, returned to a joyous welcome in Rome after being held by hostage takers for more than 3 weeks. The landing at Rome's Ciampino airport a day after her release in Kabul was broadcast live across the country. The 32-year-old was met by Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi. Italians greeted the news of her release with joy. She told Italian newspapers before leaving that she had been treated well and that she had been guarded by women. The Afghan government said Cantoni's release was the result of efforts by the police and people such as tribal elders and Muslim clerics who had helped with negotiations. It said she was in good health and had been held hostage by a criminal gang and insisted no ransom had been paid for concessions given for her freedom.
The opposition reiterated its accusation against Free Patriotic Movement leader Michel Aoun, saying he was dealing with pro-Syrian figures and breaking up the unity of the country's opposition. The latest developments in this report. The latest accusation comes days before a heavy electoral battle set to take place in the Qasr Wenjbil area of Mount Lebanon between Michel Aoun and the opposition's United Electoral Front, especially Druze leader Walid Jumblat. Speaking at an electoral rally in Jdeida, opposition MP Nassib Lahoud attacked Aoun's alliance with Deputy Speaker Michel Mour, a staunch pro-Syrian politician in the country, and labeled it as a, quote, abnormal alliance. Lahoud claimed Aoun closed the door to forming a unity list with Lebanon's opposition. Lahoud, tipped as a candidate for the presidential seat, said the opposition called Aoun's move a, quote, major political sin. He said the alliance was not just against common national sense, it also hinders the completion of Lebanese sovereignty and independence. But Aoun, who has been the staunchest anti-Syrian opposition figure during his 15-year of Syrian-imposed exile in France, accused the opposition of driving him to the alliance with Mour. Aoun said he chose to have an incomplete list, but claimed the rest of the opposition, quote, ganged up against him, leaving him no other choice. Aoun said Saad Hariri, whose list won unanimously in the capital's parliamentary elections, was financing electoral lists all over Lebanon. In an electoral rally in Ain al-Rumaini, where the Lebanese civil war erupted 30 years ago, Aoun also defended his political ally in the Babda Alay district of Mount Lebanon, pro-Syrian politician Talal Arslan. He said no one in the opposition has the right to judge others because, quote, everyone in the opposition today was part of the Syrian regime in Lebanon and they all had turns visiting Anjar, in reference to the former heart of Syria's intelligence service. The most heated battle of Lebanon's legislative elections is this Sunday. It involves Aoun against the coalition led by Druze leader MP Walid Jumblat in the central Babda Alay constituency and against a Christian alliance in the Biblos Kasserwan district. Aoun slammed his rivals as traditionalists who benefited from Syria's role in Lebanon since the end of the 1975 to 1990 civil war, with some turning against Damascus only in recent months. Aoun and his allies are putting up candidates for around 25 seats, mostly in Mount Lebanon. He is running at the head of 8-member ticket in Biblos Kasserwan constituency. Jumblat and top aide Marwan Hamedeh have won by default in the Shuf constituency as they run uncontested. The Druze chief has allied himself with the Christian Lebanese Forces Group, a civil war foe. The general elections, which started in Beirut on May 29th, will be wrapping up in the north on June 19th. The elections are the first in 3 decades without a Syrian military presence after Syria pulled out its troops from Lebanon in April after large protests in the wake of the February assassination of former Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri. During a trip to Turkey where he met with Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan said, he was considering sending a UN verification team back to Lebanon to check reports that Syrian intelligence agents may still be in the country, as Annan dispatched his special envoy for the Syrian-Lebanon situation, Terry Road-Larson, to Damascus for talks with President Bashar al-Assad to be held on Sunday. Meanwhile, the United States said it was concerned about the possibility of a pattern of political killings in Lebanon, as 2 newspapers reported that Bush administration had word of a Syrian hit list targeting Lebanese leaders. UN Secretary General Kofi Annan said he was considering sending a UN verification team back to Lebanon to check reports that Syrian intelligence agents may still be in the country. A UN mission reported on May 23rd that Syria had withdrawn its soldiers, but said there was no way to determine if agents were still in the country. Annan told reporters the world body is receiving reports that there may be elements that are still there, and the UN is considering the possible return of the verification team to ascertain what's going on. France and the United States had been urging Annan to send the verification mission to Lebanon again, but the Secretary General was reluctant to do so, believing the team would return with the same inclusive report. But one key envoy said Annan was now reconsidering because, quote, France and the US apparently got to him. Syria's US Ambassador Faisal Magdad said if there were intelligence agents in Lebanon, they were from France, the United States or Israel. In the US, Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice said what Washington does not want is that there is a pattern now of assassination of key figures, because that would be very, very destabilizing in Lebanon. In an interview with PBS, Rice said it would have to point a finger at those forces that have been destabilizing in Lebanon. She stressed the US expect a full investigation of the assassination of anti-Syrian journalist Amir Kassir. Asked whether Syrian intelligence agents had withdrawn from Lebanon, she said some people have their doubts and need to keep pressure on the Syrians to be transparent about what they're doing in Lebanon. Rice added that the Bush administration was being very clear to people that it wants an international spotlight on what is going on in Lebanon, so the Lebanese can hold elections free of foreign influence. Rice's comments came as the New York Times and the Washington Post said the U.S. has credible information that Syrian operatives plan to try to assassinate senior Lebanese politicians and that Syrian military intelligence forces are returning to Lebanon to create an environment of intimidation. The report follows last week's assassination of prominent anti-Syrian journalist Qasir. The report, citing a senior official who spoke on condition of anonymity, comes just ahead of Sunday's third round of a four-stage parliamentary elections in Lebanon that many accuse Syria of trying to destabilize. The official said the information had come from a variety of Lebanese sources and that officials assess it as credible. Both newspapers report that Bush administration officials said the United States has received credible word that Syria has developed a, quote, hit list targeting prominent Lebanese political leaders. There was no immediate comment on the reports from the State Department. Former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri was assassinated in February. An anti-Syrian columnist, Amir Qasir, was killed last week in Beirut. Lebanon's pro-Syrian regime and its political masters in Damascus have denied widespread allegations that they were behind the two killings.
The Secretary General of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, gave a speech in front of big crowds who gathered under the slogan, "A homeland that protects the resistance." While members of the Mount Lebanon list were present, he called for a real reconciliation process and for putting the civil war behind them. He said that he will maintain a continuous dialogue with all political forces in the country without excluding anyone. Mr. Nasrallah mentioned the slogan, 10,452 square kilometers. He pointed out that includes the Shabaa farms and the 7 occupied villages. Mr. Nasrallah also confirmed that everyone should vote for all the members of the Mount Lebanon list.
Let us go back to the slogan. Lebanon wants its 10,452 square kilometers. Wasn't this the slogan that Sheikh Bashir Ismail called for at that period of time? Be very attentive. Do you know how much 10,452 square kilometers is? This means that the Shabaa farm will include the peaks of the mountain range. Even more than this, Lebanon will not become 10,452 square kilometers without the return of the 7 villages in northern occupied Palestine. Based on this vision, which is what the Mount Lebanon list calls for, which also calls for national unity, strengthening it, and for reforms and resolving major crises, implementing the Taif Agreement, and protecting the resistance. It is natural for Hezbollah to unite with the rest of the political forces and leaders in the Mount Lebanon list, which always included Parliament member Haj Ali Ammar. For those who are debating whether the resistance should keep its weapons, I say weapons are not what matters. What matters is the will of the resistance. If we do not stand up in Lebanon, the day will come when the Americans will make our choices for us, the small and the big ones. They will appoint our president, parliament members, ministers and army officers and form our government. They are intervening in our daily lives, our schools, and even in the Bible and the Quran. This is the truth.
في تفاصيلنا ومناهجنا الدراسية ويتدخلون حتى في الإنجيل والقرآن. هذه الحقيقة.
Mr. Nasrallah met with members of the Mount Lebanon list in the elections district of Ba Abda Aleh and talked with Parliament member Akram al-Shaib after the meeting. Al-Shaib confirmed that they should work together with Hezbollah to support and protect the resistance.
We met with Mr. Nasrallah to show support for the unity of vision and for the position of our brothers in Hezbollah. Like Hezbollah, we consider ourselves the main partners in building our homeland. Like the resistance has protected the national unity in its discourse over the past years. We, the Mount Lebanon list, will work together to support and protect the resistance so it can defend Lebanon, our homeland.
بدأت اليوم في إيران حملات الانتخابات الرئاسية المزمع إجراؤها.
Presidential election campaigns began in Iran for the election day, which will take place on the 17th of this month, amidst expectations that the former moderate president Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani will win the election. According to public surveys, the first round of elections will not guarantee victory for any of the 8 candidates, because none will get 50% of the votes, which is the percentage for winning the election. It is still to be seen, but it is expected that after a week from the first round, another round will follow, where the first 2 candidates will compete against each other.
من أي تيار سيأتي الرئيس الإيراني الجديد؟ وهل سينجح الإصلاحيون في سحب البساط من تحت أقدام المحافظين؟
From which party will the new Iranian president emerge? Will the liberals be successful in pulling the rug out from under the conservatives? Many questions concerning this issue are being voiced on the streets of Iran as the countdown for the election gets started. It appears that everyone is busy with the campaigns. Some are preparing for it, and others are just talking about it. The campaign started on a bad note as news of burning banners and pictures of some of the presidential candidates have been reported. In addition, the websites of some presidential candidates have been hacked. Such incidents suggest that the election battle will not be easy. All the candidates are hoping to win, or at least have a good showing. However, most polls show that former President Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani is in the lead. Many observers expect that Mr. Rafsanjani will indeed be the next president of Iran. The most recent surveys show that Rafsanjani is still ahead of all the candidates, even though his popularity has slipped a bit. His support went from 35% in a previous survey to approximately 28% in the most recent survey. Mohammed Bakr Kalabaz, a former parliament member of the Council of Revolutionary Guards and the police force, came in next at 14%. Mustafa Moin, an opposing reformer and a former minister of education, came in third with 10.2%. The survey showed that general support for the 4 conservative candidates, Kalabaz Ali Lajani, the former president of the Iranian broadcasting station, Mohammed Ahmadinejad, the former mayor of Tehran, Mohsen Riyadi, the former leader of the Revolutionary Guards Council, was a little less than the combined support for Rafsanjani. Such results push the conservatives to restructure their efforts by pressuring 3 of the 4 candidates to withdraw from the election. Reformers did not surrender, even though their chances of winning are diminishing. They are urging the Iranian people to go to the election booth, saying that this may put the reformers in power. Rafsanjani started his election campaign like the rest, by making promises. However, most importantly, he is trying to give the West indication that his country will take a new direction if he should become the next president. He called on the U.S. to free frozen assets of Iranians in U.S. banks in exchange for opening negotiation channels with Washington. Perhaps Rafsanjani is not only trying to get support from inside Iran, but also from the international community community, which has been increasingly critical of Iran and threatened to punish it on several occasions.
Prime Minister Ahmed al-Qurayh handed over a message to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad from President Mahmoud Abbas relating to the outcomes of his meetings with a number of Arab countries in Washington. Syrian news agency reported that Qurayh and Assad meeting tackled the situation in the Palestinian arena, as well as the bilateral relations between the Palestinian and Syrian people. Minister of Foreign Affairs Dr. Nasser al-Qudwa held today at the ministry premises in Ramallah a meeting with Arab and foreign ambassadors, credited to the PNA to brief them on the latest political developments in the region. Hundreds of citizens in Salfit took part in a massive march organized by the national and Islamic powers, as well as the Public Committee for Defending the Racial Wall. The march was participated by a number of Palestinian figures, in addition to the World Women Movement for Peace, the International Solidarity Movement, and Israeli peace movements who reject Israeli occupation policy. The march was launched from the Salfit municipality building, heading towards the land that Israel is still raising, in an attempt to prevent them from continuing constructing the racial wall, which confiscates more than 52% of the land city. Pakistan-administered Kashmir, June the 2nd, Muslim separatist leaders from Indian Kashmir were given a rousing welcome when they crossed the heavily militarized ceasefire line here Thursday on a historic visit to the Pakistani zone of the disputed Himalaya region. The Prime Minister of Pakistan-administered Kashmir, Sardar Sikandar Hayat, and other senior politicians hugged the leaders as they arrived in this town near the line of control. The de facto border between India and Pakistan Kashmir, the Indian Kashmir leaders walked across the command bridge on the Jhelum River, which forms part of the LOC, and then drove to Muzaffarabad, the capital of the Pakistan-administered zone of Kashmir. The visit of 9 moderate leaders of the All Parties Hurriyat Conference, APHC, the main separatist umbrella group engaged in a 15-year campaign against Indian rule in Kashmir, as refers to the Pakistani zone. The trip is part of the peace process between India and Pakistan to end the bitter dispute over divided Kashmir, the Himalaya region that has sparked 2 of 3 wars between the nuclear-armed neighbors.
International efforts and moves coordinate for the forthcoming Israeli pull-out from Gaza, and some of the West Bank settlements will start to gather peace the visit of a U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice to the Palestinian territory, where talks with the Palestinian leadership on the withdrawal plan will be carried out. Economic-wise, the Quartet envoy for economic issues, James Wolfenson, will visit Palestine and Israel to discuss the economic aspects of the withdrawal, as well as the control of borders in the aftermath of implementing the pull-out plan. Families of prisoners and detainees held today their weekly sit-in strike in front of the International Committee of the Red Cross premises in Gaza. The strikers called on the world community to press on Israeli side to release all prisoners inside Israeli jails, particularly the sick detainees. Meanwhile, Advocates Organization of Prisoners called for opening the file of medical negligence that the prisoners have been subjugated to inside the prisons and putting an end to their suffering in the Israeli prisons. The organization called the international community to immediately move and save the life of prisoners in accordance with international laws and the 4th Geneva Convention. Israeli soldiers used tear gas to break up a demonstration by Palestinian villagers and foreign activists protesting against the Israeli racial barrier. Palestinian villagers, around 15 foreign peace activists, took part in the protest at Marda village, north of the Palestinian city of Nablus. The army fired tear gas as demonstrators marched towards land being bulldozed for the sector of the barrier being built around the sprawling Jewish settlement of Ariel. Medical sources said that 10 protesters suffered respiratory problems as a result. Palestinian sources said around 700 olive trees were uprooted from Marda last week to make way for the giant barrier, which often juts deep into the occupied West Bank.
The Basque separatist group ETA carried out a mortar attack on Zaragoza airport in northeastern Spain today without causing casualties, claiming responsibility in a telephone warning beforehand to a Basque newspaper. The Basque daily Gara said it had received a phone call this morning purporting to be from ETA and warning of a blast which police said happened shortly after midday local time. Airport officials said there were no injuries in the explosion, which occurred some 300 meters from the airport perimeter fence. All flights were suspended as police sealed off the zone to calm the area amid media reports 3 rocket launchers and at least 2 mortars had been found. In Brussels, U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld said that the U.S. would rather have Guantanamo Bay detainees imprisoned by their home countries. Rumsfeld spoke a day after saying he was unaware of anyone in the Bush administration discussing closing the prison camp in Cuba. Hours later, U.S. President George W. Bush refused to rule out shutting the facility, saying his administration was exploring all alternatives for detaining the prisoners. Human rights groups and former detainees say prisoners at Guantanamo have been mistreated. The Defense Secretary said interrogators had gained valuable information from Guantanamo prisoners, which have saved lives and helping authorities to thwart attacks. The prison holds about 540 men accused of terrorism, most of them alleged members of Al-Qaeda or former Taliban government in Afghanistan. 10 days before the beginning of the rainy Kharif season in the Governorate of Dhafar, His Excellency Engineer Ahmed bin Ali Al-Amri, President of Dhafar Municipality and head of the main committee to Salah Kharif Festival 2005, revealed the efforts being put to prepare the appropriate atmosphere for the visitors of Dhafar Governorate this year. Efforts are accelerating for readying the suitable atmosphere for the Dhafar Governorate visitors this year by adding the touristic services and utilities, aiming at bringing the tourist season and Salah Kharif Festival 2005 to success. In this framework, His Excellency Engineer Ahmed bin Ali Al-Amri stressed that all the concerned entities are keen to provide the requirements for the tourist and the visitor in this season beside the residents. He referred in a speech to Oman News Agency that the Dhafar municipality is currently very active to complete a number of projects, including development of Al-Hafa area, re-asphalting some roads, and implementation of a number of maintenance and renovation projects. He added that the festival organizing committee is endeavoring to develop and renovate the infrastructures and activities of the festival in such a manner that suits the tradition and customs. The committee is focusing during this year to increase the various activities related to entertainment, like games, children activities, and materializing the festival theater on a daily basis, and the activities are distributed in a studied manner. In a new step, some of the festival activities will be shifted outside the municipality entertainment center.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.